we're in the Gulf of America now. Yeah.
I I love that shit. I'm jealous. I got FOMO. Our country's fucked.
Well, there's, I guess you can start taking action, I guess. It definitely took us a while to um, get to where we are now. It took, I think, getting to an awful place to get finally into a better place. So I'm hoping that, we continue in that direction, obviously. I think we needed, for at least us, the Biden-Harris administration, for people to realize how out of touch with reality, how progressive, how radical the Democratic Party has become. And even the Democrats have betrayed their own party because they're like, this has become way too extreme for even myself. So you see these lifelong Democrats now switching to the Republican Party because it's even too much for them. Um, so sometimes it takes the bad to for people to see that we need to start changing things up and switching directions here.
Yeah, I think we're there. We're just behind you. We're always like a year or two behind, but we're catching up because we're fucked here. We're in a mess,
Yeah.
especially now that
Hey,
Trump's back in, which I love, but our country has no leaders.
maybe you'll be the 51st state. Who knows?
Hey, I
Kind of
wouldn't
cool.
mind it. People look at me like I'm fucking nuts when I say that or think that or even suggest that I'm okay with it.
Hmm.
If our country could like run itself on its own, which we can't, then it'd be good, but we can't. So people that
Right.
pretend that we can run on our own oil, we don't have it. We're not self-sustained whatsoever, not even close. We're like 10, 20 years away from that.
Right.
But yeah, let's jump right into it. Thanks for coming on. I don't know if
Yeah.
you know, I have a daughter, Riley. She's 9, so I'm like neck deep into speaking out about these things, especially since she's not far off from that point where, she's playing with the boys in hockey right now, but it's at the point where the girls have to split off just based on size and skill and more size. But we're at that point where even in our country, like people think that we're crazy when we talk about this stuff. I sent you a link to that professor that's swimming with 13-year-olds. That was reported like 18 months ago. One of my clients slash friends, she's actually training a 13-year-old whose mom just brought it up again. So this guy's still swimming with young girls. Changed his name. He's still a professor at York University. Swimming Canada defended it. It's fucking bananas. So you as a swimmer, having swam against Bill Thomas, Leah, whatever you want to call him, you've gone through it and it's happening here, not only trans sex, but trans aged. Like a fucking 50-year-old is swimming with 13-year-olds. It's absurd.
Yeah, I think the best word for it is criminal.
Yeah.
What's been allowed to happen in our country, what's being allowed to happen in other countries such as Canada. And it's insanity. It's crazy that we've gotten to this point in society. We're saying that men and women are different. There are only two sexes, and you can't change your sex, and each sex is deserving of equal opportunity and privacy in locker rooms is deemed as controversial. But here we are, but we're pushing back, and I think that's what we're doing here in the States. That's what we've seen this past week with our leaders, President Trump signing an executive order protecting women's sports. We saw him even sign an executive order deeming that there are only two sexes, two genders, which is completely insane that we even have to do that. I think it's wild, but again, that just shows how out of touch with reality we have become as not only a country, but as a worldwide, like I feel like infection with this whole gender ideology. It is really just festered within our societies. And so I think, like I said earlier, I think it's taken us getting to a point where we're this far, this crazy for people to wake up and realize, okay, wow, we need to actually start thinking for ourselves, maybe questioning these organizations, such as in my case, the NCAA. When we went and competed against Leah Thomas, this was an organization who we had thought, or at least were told, had our best interests at heart. But maybe we should be questioning these organizations, our leaders, who are obviously failing us. And so I'm familiar with. I was looking at pictures of your beautiful family and your daughter, and so as a parent, especially with a daughter. Who's playing a sport such as hockey? That's obviously a very physically you get in contact, physically contact sport, it's dangerous. It's
Yeah.
dangerous to be playing against boys, and also it's unfair to be forcing women in locker rooms with men. That goes against our right to privacy and common sense. There's a reason why we have two bathrooms, two separate bathrooms, two sporting categories. There's a reason for all of it, and I think we need to get back to reality. People need to not be so afraid to speak up and speak truth because that's really what it is we're going against objective truth. And we definitely need to start getting our bearings and getting back to that for sure.
Heck yeah. I love it. I just want to qualify so people that don't know you, you swam for the University of Kentucky. You were on the same team as Riley Gaines. I read her book. I love what she's doing. I love what you're doing. It's gained a ton of steam. You're an All-American, multiple time All-American, SEC champion, and University of Kentucky's Miss Wildcat 2023. How old are you actually now?
I'm 24, so I just turned 24 at the end of last year. And yeah, it's been sports have been a big part of my life. I started swimming when I was 4 years old. I fell in love with it. I started out in swim lessons, and then my older sister and we were like competing in the swim lessons, and my mom was like, "Okay, we need to move on from swim lessons, and we're gonna put you in a competitive swimming program." And so it kind of one thing led to another. Fell in love with swimming and just loved the thought of pushing myself to achieve goals, setting goals and accomplishing them, working hard. Definitely a lot of life skills that made me into the person I am today, which I'm very thankful for. I made it an early goal of mine to swim in college and was thankful enough to be offered opportunities to swim in college and kind of have my pick of the litter, which again, I'm very thankful for that. I chose Kentucky because it fit my goals, the team, the culture, the coaches, everything aligned with the direction I wanted to go. I obviously wanted to reach the highest possible level in swimming, and reaching that college level was definitely one of them. And so, that's where I met Riley. We swam similar events. We were both freestylers, the 200 free being one that we competed against each other a lot. So we trained together so many hours, so many days, so many miles. It's insane to look back. I don't know how we did it. I think if I got in a pool now, I think I would sink to the bottom. But um, we obviously we faced a lot of difficulties, a lot of trials going into college. My freshman year was 2019, 2020. That was the year that COVID hit, which we all know very well about. Definitely struck our country big time. We were getting ready actually to go to NCAA's. We were only a couple days out from leaving, and our coaches pulled us aside after practice and told us that NCAA's was canceled. This was a meet we had been working months, the entire season for, was canceled, and that we were to pack up our stuff and go home. And we would actually have to move out of the dorms. The people who lived in the dorms would have to move out. So this was definitely, unsettling. It was heartbreaking to work an entire season and not be able to see how you could perform all the work that you had put in and not having that pay off is definitely it's difficult as an athlete, someone who you're pouring your life into, your blood, sweat, and tears. But we kept our heads up. I went home. We were home for that entire summer because we were shut down. And I trained in a pond down the street from my house. It was freezing cold. Don't recommend. There's snakes and turtles and probably more things I don't even want to know about. And then going into my sophomore year, lots of mask mandates, contact tracing, vaccine mandates, which again, I think was a real test to the American people to see how far people are willing to go to comply with what they say is, the right thing to do and not thinking for yourselves. And that was something that only a few people on my team, Riley and myself being included, refused to do. Had a lot of questions about the vaccine. This was something that hadn't been tested. It was brand new. And honestly, kind of being the rebel I am, I was like, the more they're pushing this on me, the more I don't want to get it. So I
Yes.
definitely, even though our coaches and our athletic administrators told us, you are not protecting your team, you're being bad leader, a bad captain, and setting a bad example, putting your team at risk by not getting this vaccine. But I didn't feel that way. I felt I was not only protecting myself, but protecting my team from setting the example that, okay, I'm going to think for myself. I don't think that this is something that I need. I had already had COVID. I was going to rely on my immune system to protect me, and it did. Um, I know that's not the case for everyone, but for me, that was the best choice. So that year was definitely filled with a lot of more obstacles. And we thought at that point, okay, we're in the clear. I think everything that could possibly happen as far as some sort of pandemic or any crazy, crazy thing that could happen is now behind us. But my junior year, this was the 2021-2022 season. This was the season where we were made aware of this person named Leah Thomas. About halfway through the season, we go to a meet where we are ranked then afterwards throughout the country, throughout the nation, where we're ranked going into NCAAs. This gives us a nice benchmark to see where we're seated going in, who we're going to be competing against. And at this point, you're pretty familiar with the other names on that list, or at least the top few. And we noticed a name going through the rankings that we'd never heard of before, coming from a team, University of Pennsylvania, which isn't typically known to generate top end swimmers, let alone a senior who had apparently come out of the woodwork somehow their senior year. Had a lot of questions about it, but our questions were quickly answered when an article came out saying that Leah Thomas, formerly known as Will Thomas, competed on the University of Pennsylvania men's team for 3 years, only to now take a year off and start swimming on the women's team. So that's just to say a man who competed for 3 years, taking a whole year off, is now coming back and still dominating by seconds in multiple events, from events ranging from the 50 to the mile, which is like having your fastest sprinter being also your fastest distance runner. That's unheard of. You usually have your sprinters and you have your distance runners. And so it was obvious that there was something wrong here. But honestly, for us as athletes, seeing this and realizing that this was actually a male, this was not a woman, we felt relieved, because if we were to compete or come into contact with this would be at the NCAA meet, which would be in March later that year, and we were in November at this time. And we were relieved because we thought the NCAA, again, an organization who is a huge proponent, or at least they said, of Title IX, equal opportunity, fairness, in women, we thought they would see it as we saw it. Absolute insanity. They wouldn't allow this man to compete at NCAA championships. What was already being allowed to compete in their conference was insane and shouldn't have been allowed to happen in the first place. But of course, this wouldn't reach the national level. It would be quickly put to a stop. But that's not, in fact, what we saw. We got to NCAAs, saw Leah Thomas there, Will Thomas, fully intact, male genitalia. It's not hard to tell in a women's swimsuit, a man standing there with a bulge. It's definitely something that kind of blew my mind. I watched him take away titles the first night in the 500 freestyle, away from girls who I had watched on the Olympic level, taking national records. I mean, these were the phenoms of the sport, and he just blew them away. And it wasn't if you watched the technique, if you watched the little finite details that we as women, once you get to that level, you have to, those are the little tiny finite details are what we're working on. He did poorly. So that's just to say that, the physical differences between men and women, it's not that we're not equal, or somehow men are better. We're just different, and we have different physical ceilings, and it's very obvious in sports. And so it was heartbreaking to see that, but the atmosphere we faced in the locker room was definitely one of shock, humiliation, betrayal really by the NCAA, who, going into this meet, we weren't forewarned, we weren't asked for our consent, and we weren't given another option of changing. And I wasn't confronted with this or made aware of this until I was in that environment, until I was in the locker room changing. And of course, in the sport of swimming, you're wearing these super tight. I know I'm going on very, very long, so feel
No,
free
it's
to
all good.
interrupt
It's all
me
good.
anytime. You're putting on these skin tight racing suits that can take upwards of 20 to 30 minutes to put on. And of course, you're sweating, it's hot in there, you're, cramped together. But it's typically, a place of high energy. You're talking with your teammates, you're talking with former competitors, lifelong competitors, people you've known for decades at this point. And but it's not a place of modesty, obviously, while you're putting these swimsuits on. And the normal energy obviously shifted while I was in there, and I could tell people got quiet. And I looked up, looked around, and turned around and saw a 6'4", and I'm telling you, I'm 6 feet tall as a woman. I'm pretty tall. This was a 6'4" man changing, fully exposed, fully naked, fully intact male genitalia, changing a mere 10 feet from me, while me, myself, and many other women in that locker room were simultaneously changing, fully undressed, completely caught off guard immediately. The reaction, the innate reaction is to cover yourselves and be like, is this, I think I asked myself, is this really happening? Like, I kind of laughed because I was like, this is insane. I never in my life expected to be in a locker room changing with a man. And so, quickly changed, finished up, left. The rest of that meet, made sure that, he had already gone in and changed before I could go in. So not only did it affect you mentally, but it affects your physical preparation of,
Yeah.
preparing for your races and stuff. We actually had a girl, Kylie Alons, who is in the NCAA lawsuit, that we're suing the NCAA for violating Title IX over all of that situation. She went and found a janitor's closet to change into because she felt safer changing in a janitor's closet than she did changing in the women's locker room. So I think if that doesn't tell you the atmosphere that we were forced into, I don't know what does. But it was crazy. It was something that I never thought would ever happen to us on a national stage. Obviously, this is one of the fastest meets in the entire world, arguably. And so we couldn't believe it happened. But obviously, we've seen that whole story blow up. That's where Riley, my teammate, tied with Leah Thomas for fifth place in the 200 freestyle. And she got behind the awards podium and was told that the trophy would have to go to Thomas, and was denied a trophy. She got to hold the sixth place trophy up there, which is an iconic photo as well, of her standing very small, obviously, next to this male. And just shows you the injustice that happened to so many women at that meet in so many different ways. Um, and ever since then, we continued to see it over and over again in many sports, many, like, all age ranges, all levels. And that's why I started speaking out. It actually didn't take that instance for me to start speaking out. I have a younger sister who was 16 years old at the time. She was a swimmer as well. She was swimming for a YMCA team that practiced and changed and shared the facilities, the locker rooms with the members. And there were men going in and changing in the women's locker. And these are men who identify as women. So men going in and changing in the women's locker room. And she spoke up about this. She brought it to her coach's attention. She brought it to the YMCA administration's attention. She was actually laughed at and told that there was nothing they could do about this. And that if she felt uncomfortable, she could go and change elsewhere. And so she did. But then she went back to them and asked them, why is it that I have to go and change in a different locker room? Why can't the man go and change in a different locker room? And also, why aren't we telling these parents who are sending their 5 and 6 year old and up girls into practice to then go change in a locker room where there are men going in and changing? Doesn't matter if they're exposing themselves, but those little girls in the locker rooms, I've lived my life in a locker room practically. And it isn't a place of modesty. You should be able to feel comfortable changing into your clothes. But these, little girls are obviously changing, and these men are in there probably watching them as well. The first time my sister saw this was she had gone into the locker rooms after practice to change with her teammates. And obviously you don't look around and stare at people, but she could tell someone was kind of looking at them, looked over, and this person, this man, was sitting in a chair in the corner in a women's swimsuit, just sitting there watching them. And obviously this was weird, and she thought, maybe this is just a really ugly woman, but quickly realized this is actually a man. So that was, of course, upsetting. She felt unsafe, uncomfortable, went to her coach about it, and that's when she was told that there was nothing he could do about it. So really, I have to say, shame on the coach. But also shame on the YMCA. This is obviously an organization that in their mission statement clearly say they're to be upholding Christian values. And by allowing men into women's locker rooms, they were not doing that. And so she brought this to them. Again, there was no resolve. And as a result of her speaking up, she was kicked off of her swim team, told that they no longer felt it appropriate for her to be practicing with the team anymore, and that she would also be banned from the YMCA facilities. Wouldn't even be able to park in the parking lot. So they made her feel as though she were a criminal in this case, and also made to feel as though her feelings of feeling unsafe in a locker room with men were wrong. And it was just the absurd gaslighting that not only in this case, but in many other cases that women have received for simply feeling the gut feeling that it's wrong to have men in women's spaces. So that's kind of how I've gotten to this point, why I started speaking out. That's my personal history and attachment to this issue. It's definitely something I'm very passionate about. It's something that I felt it on my heart to use not only my story but my younger sister's story to hopefully encourage other people to speak up and share theirs, because we obviously had too much silence. There was not only silence, but there was silencing going on, not just within these organizations, but within our administration. The Biden-Harris administration not only didn't listen to us and deny us as women, but they actively worked against us for years. Obviously, we have a new administration that's doing the opposite now and is actually helping us make some changes. But that's kind of how I've gotten to where I am today and how I got involved.
It's insane. I the fact that this is actually a conversation is wild, but it is. It's happening a ton. Um, Years ago, I said to somebody it was going to take, if it didn't take a boycott, it was going to take actual women speaking up. Because when someone's like me, a dude, especially a white guy, people don't listen as much. It's so much stronger coming from women, and it's even more stronger now coming from the younger generation. And I think it's awesome seeing and hearing ladies like you doing this. Because like growing up, I got to imagine when I played hockey, I got as high as junior. Back in like the 90s and early 2000s, you didn't train nearly as much. You would play hockey and then all summer off, come back, put your skates on, and get back on the ice. I could imagine you being 24 now. You grew up, I guess, more in the 2000s and the teens of the 2000s. How many hours a week would you put in the pool to get your ass to the NCAA championships?
Countless. But I mean, in the high school level, obviously you're waking up before the sun comes up, going into the pool, practicing for 2 hours, 2.5 hours sometimes, going to school right after school, go back right to the pool, swim another 2.5 hours, go home, do your homework, eat dinner, go to bed, wake up, do the same thing all over again. Um, Obviously, I knew I wanted to compete on the collegiate level and I wanted to be as prepared as I possibly could once I got there. But once I got to college, I thought I was prepared. I thought I had done all the right things and, I would be okay. But little did I know what I thought I was doing in high school was hard. I actually knew what real hard was. But in college, again, you're waking up early in the morning, swimming 3 hours in the morning, going to class, maybe squeezing in a 30-minute nap, going back to practice in the evening, getting dinner, doing your homework, going to tutors, going to bed, waking up, doing the exact same thing over again, while also fitting in any sort of recovery, rehab that you do, because a lot of swimmers have shoulder injuries. It's a lot of overuse and a lot of injuries to the shoulders. So fitting all of that in, it's truly a lifelong commitment, and you're giving up a lot of things. You're giving up a lot of personal life things, a lot of sacrifices involved in sports. You probably know this yourself being an athlete. There are a lot of sacrifices, but you do it because you know that's what it takes to compete at the highest possible level. And so I gladly did it. I loved it. It was my job pretty much in college. And I would do it all over again. And that's, again, I think why I fight, because we were given so many opportunities through sports. I was able to get an education. I was able to develop lifelong skills that, again, shaped me into the person who I am today and have helped me be confident, unapologetic, and a good leader and communicator and in so many other areas of life. So truly thankful for sports, and that's why we fight, is because we've had those opportunities from women who fought for generations before us, and unfortunately, we're having to step up and do the same thing over again. But again, in college, it's a lifelong commitment to say the least, and your world truly revolves around your sport. But again, that's what it takes to compete at the highest possible level, as you said.
Yeah. And the worst thing about it is I tapped out at a level based on my ability and then my choice to become a cop at a young age. I didn't lose titles or lose championships or not make teams because there was someone there that shouldn't be there. I just didn't make it. Where you get to a point where you're swimming, maybe you're a young teenager, and then the boys and the girls just split off, and the boys get bigger and taller and stronger. Their femurs are bigger, their lungs are have more capacity. Everything's bigger and stronger. That's not a sexist thing to say. It's just the way it is. That's just that's just fucking biology. And then it's just wild. Like, was Bill or Leah the first guy to end up in the pool with you, or had you heard this in other swim teams or tournaments or meets or whatever you would call it for swimming? Or was this the first time that you'd seen this or heard about it?
So I had heard it. I had heard about similar things happening, but it was typically in other sports, and it was n never something that was really broadcasted on media. It wasn't, brought to our attention on a very high level, and so it was just obviously something so insane that we never thought we would ever be confronted with. I mean, it is insane. It's insane to think of men being put into women's sports. Obviously, that's what we've seen though the past 3 years, because so many women have had to speak up and share their stories, because people were like, well, why are we having to pass legislation? Why are we presenting these bills in these states to prevent men from being in women's sports? It's not happening. When in fact it was happening. So it took women speaking up and sharing their stories, what had happened to them, what was happening to them, and what has continued to happen to women, for people to realize what was going on, because our mainstream media, our left-wing media, who kind of rules the media, um, doesn't want to tell you those things. They're only going to tell you what fits their narrative, and it wasn't fitting their narrative. But once we started speaking out, obviously they couldn't keep us quiet for long. They definitely tried. There was a lot of emotional manipulation, emotional blackmail, bullying. Really, they told us, oh, if you speak up, you're not going to get into grad school. You're not going to find a job. You're going to lose your friends. You're going to lose all of these things. If you speak out, you're going to be seen as hateful and bigoted and transphobic and all of these awful things. And of course, as a woman, you don't want to be seen as hateful. You don't want to be seen as someone who doesn't want to just simply let someone exist. So there was a lot of like gaslighting for us, like, okay, maybe we need to start rethinking how we feel about this. When in reality, that was so not true. How we felt was, it's not, has nothing to do with a person's right to live their life the way they want. I think, God gave us the ability to, and the free will to live our lives the way we want. It's when you start demanding, though, that other people affirm and abide by your way of life, that's when it infringes on my freedom and my First Amendment rights. And so that's kind of how we've gotten to this point. And it's absolutely, again, it's absurd, but it's a fight that we're having to fight.
Your coaches, were they primarily like a mix of men and women, or was it like one or the other or more of one?
Yeah, so we had a male head coach who was fully supportive of us. The problem was, and I think most coaches on the pool deck were supportive of us. They thought what was happening was wrong, but they were also afraid. They were afraid to ask questions or to say something because their jobs were on the line. Their families, they have to go home and provide and put food on the table for their kids. So they're worried about their own careers, basically. And that was something that, like, I wondered. I was like, well, why isn't a coach? Why isn't a parent? Why isn't someone in the NCAA? Why isn't someone with political power even speaking up and saying something? I think it took all the way up into the moment of them stepping up onto the blocks and blowing the buzzer for me to realize what was actually happening, and what this meant for the future of women's sports and women's rights. Because what we were allowing, what we were saying, and asked to say was okay was the complete and utter erasure of women's sports. Again, why do we have two sporting categories? There is a reason why we have men's and women's sports. If it isn't physical differences, then what is it? Um, and so we were completely going against all of that. Again, it's not about attacking Will Thomas, Leah Thomas. It's not about attacking a specific person. It's about going against sanity. It's about going against common sense. It's about going against the integrity of women's sports. That very same meet, we were celebrating the 50th anniversary of Title IX. This piece of the Civil Rights Act, which prevents sex-based discrimination. It protects women's sports. It protects a broad range of other things, women's opportunities in education. We were celebrating the 50th anniversary of Title IX at that very same meet where this man was being allowed to take away opportunities from women. So it's so ironic in this sense. And obviously, we've seen the attack on Title IX by the Biden-Harris administration. They actively rewrote Title IX, this 37-word piece of legislation, rewrote it to equate sex with gender identity, made it over 500,000 words long, 1,577 pages to be exact, 500,000 words long, to equate sex with gender identity, this insanity. Thankfully, it didn't pass. We had so many attorney generals from different states fight back and file lawsuits against the illegal rewrite. Thankfully, we've seen it restored, but obviously we need to get sex-based definitions, because if we can't even define what a woman is, we have a sitting Supreme Court justice who can't even define what a woman is because she claims she's not a biologist. Absolute disgrace, if I'm being asked, as a Supreme Court justice. But we have to get legislation passed that clearly defines man and woman. If not, all of our legislation essentially can be misinterpreted, because that's what we've seen with Title IX.
Yeah. Were you surprised that, and I'm going to go back to when your coaches kind of almost tried to guilt you into getting the jab? You're not protecting your teammates, blah, blah, blah. It's not really surprising that they didn't speak up about Leah Thomas when, they didn't really back you, not for a medical choice, right? So it's not really surprising. The whole, like, do you resent any of these people, or have you sort of just like you've moved on? Like, there's got to be a blame somewhere, and you don't want to just blame people for no reason. But what's the like? There's a reason why shit like this happens. It's because people are silent, and in my opinion, they're cowards. So when I had to leave policing, I deep down still have a little resentment towards those that were quiet and allowed people to have their businesses shut down, and people lost their livelihoods, lost their homes. Kids didn't have sports, kids didn't have school. They were locked in their homes. Abusive families. Imagine living in those fucking houses for that amount of time. And it was all because people were silent. So I love what you guys are doing, and that's the one of the biggest answers to this whole problem. But it's like, as a father, I'm not allowing this to happen, number one. And as a coach, like I coach both my kids, they look up to you. I don't know. It boggles my mind that coaches in these positions, 100% of them will be quiet, and it takes the girls to say something. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people feel as though, like, for instance, the NCAA, when asked, why aren't you doing something? Why aren't you defending your female athletes? Well, the president of the NCAA, the former president, was asked this question, and he said, well, my hands are tied. We're abiding by the presidential administration. We're following federal law. And we were like, well, what exact federal law are you following? Because it's not Title IX. And so there was a lot of fear mongering. And I think, it starts at the top and it trickles down to the bottom. So unfortunately, this whole issue became so politicized. It became so polarized, which it shouldn't have. We have Democrats voting against legislation to protect women and girls in sports. Why is that? Why are they voting when they have daughters themselves? Why are they voting against things that are to protect their own kids? It's so hypocritical, so utterly spineless and weak-kneed. And that's honestly what it is we have people bending to the people at the top, making everyone else just kind of take a knee. And we kind of thought this was a a red or blue issue, which ultimately it's not actually. It's a green issue. People follow money. So wherever their federal funding is coming from, that is what they're going to follow. That is what they're going to abide by. Moral compass completely thrown out the window. It doesn't matter what you believe is morally right anymore. It's about where the money comes from and where, how you're going to get your paycheck. So I think a lot of these institutions, it came down to, their federal funding and risk losing that. It didn't matter if it was, our safety, our opportunities, our privacy in locker rooms on the line. That all didn't matter to them, and they showed us over and over again that it didn't. So thankful for obviously this executive order that's been signed. There's still a lot of work to do, a lot of obstacles that I know that we're going to face. I don't think that the NCAA is just going to all of a sudden flip a switch and just say that they're on our side now. I think we would be naive to think that. But again, it's a battle worth having.
Oh yeah, there's years to go. I'm imagining um, the locker room. I would imagine like growing up playing hockey. It's kind of ridiculous, actually. Like when Trump got in trouble for saying something he probably shouldn't have said, he blamed it on locker room talk. And in my upbringing, that is legit true. The boys are being boys and they're being complete donkeys. You're doing and saying things that you could not say in public. One of the coaches at my gym, I think she was a trainer for her daughter's hockey team, and this is just an example of how wild it can get in dressing rooms. And the girls, I think they were like 15. They grabbed the puck and they draw a dick on the wall. So now there's a dick on the wall of the dressing room with a puck, and she's got to go clean it off and avoid all these things from the arena. But this is the shit that happens in the dressing rooms, and it's fun, it's funny, and you need to feel safe to joke around and be with the girls and do whatever you do, same as like kind of what the boys do in the room. And then not only are you having your time in there robbed of just being youthful and having a fun time, you got a dude in there with his fucking dick out. It is insane.
It's insane. It's something that I never thought I would experience. It's something that I don't think any young girl or woman should have to experience. And it's tragic, really, that we've had so many instances of this happening. And it makes me sick to think of my younger sister and what she had to face in that locker room and the feeling. As a 16-year-old, I cannot imagine putting myself in her shoes at that age, having to go up against this and speaking up against a YMCA, her coach, having her teammates even turn against her, ostracize her, make her feel as though she is wrong in this situation. It's truly tragic that it takes these cases, these instances for people to wake up and realize what's going on, and truly heartbreaking. And I just think about, again, the future and what's on the line here. I know what's at stake. I knew at the time what was at stake if I didn't speak up and say something. And I honestly felt like a coward if I didn't. I felt obligated at that point to say something, as all of these other leaders and people of political power should be doing and should have done years ago. And it just shows again the spinelessness of our leaders and how weak-kneed that they have become. And so obviously, I hope that this is, the tides are turning and people are waking up. I think, again, going back to our last election in November, this gender ideology issue was one of the most voted on issues of this past election. And I think, again, people turned out to the polls that they're sick and tired of this insanity. They're ready and honestly desperate for truth to be spoken. I think, at least my hope is that our country, the United States, sets the precedent for these other countries such as yours, Canada, and many others who are dealing with the same issue. I hope that they will see the example that we've made, and that they will start, making their own necessary changes. I know in Canada, I would love for you to explain even more what your policies are like there. I know they're pretty crazy, and kind of what's happening in your country and what your hopes are as well.
Well, have you heard of April Hutchinson, the Canadian
Yes.
weightlifter? So yeah, so I know she's been on TV with Riley. So she was on my podcast a few months ago. I talk to her often. Um, we are going through what you guys went through, probably the same, maybe worse. I would describe Canada as basically California or New York City, where that leftist woke, at least the ruling class is. But yeah, April was banned for, I believe it was a 2-year suspension for speaking up because there was a dude there lifting like weights that were, I think they would have been like 1,000th in the world as a dude, but it was like world record breaking and shattering of the next female. So yeah, April went through that. We've got this York University. So York University is probably one of Canada's largest universities, most funded universities, right outside of Toronto. And they've got this professor who's identifying now with a brand new name, female name. Shit, where is it? I'm gonna find it here. One sec. So this guy's name used to be um, Nicholas Sapita. Now goes by Melody Weishart. So he's a York University professor. Get this shit. This is wild. Still, I actually went looked at it today to make sure that he hadn't been fired and I wasn't wrong. But um, external grants, you're gonna love this shit. Principal investigator for spacing effects and critical thinking in the classroom. This motherfucker got a grant for critical thinking. He
Unbelievable.
he's a trans age he's a predator. And this is where, you know, and I appreciate it, and it's probably the good part of your character that you don't have ill will towards Billy Thomas. I struggle as a father and as someone I'm an outsider. I haven't had to deal with this, thank God, because I think I'd end up in jail. But, characters like fucking Melody here, who's a 50-year-old professor swimming with 13-year-olds, that is clearly a predator. This is somebody who wants to do horrible things to children or get off on it. And it always starts at that, just the progression of having been a cop. This is how it progresses. You start with, you know, torturing little animals, and then you become a serial killer, right? You got this clown who's swimming with young girls. I struggle with where the fathers are. I really, really struggle with that. That nothing's happened, and I'm not advocating for someone to go in and start fucking smashing knees, but you can stop people from going into an arena. You can stop people from going into a pool. Fucking put me in jail for stopping people from going into a pool. I don't give a fuck. Right? I struggle with that. What did your dad think of this?
It's he luckily was halfway across the country. He wasn't at the meet. But I do know that if he were there, he probably would have been in the same position. He would have been pulled out of there by the police, probably put into jail because he would have been in that locker room dragging Will Thomas out himself. And I think that is the normal reaction. Your reaction and your feelings of wanting to defend your daughters is the normal reaction, or it should be at least the normal reaction of any parent who thinks and has to even hear of their child being put into a situation where there's men going into their locker room. So I think that that is a very real reaction to have, and I think more parents need to lean into that instinct of protecting their kids because we didn't have enough of that. We haven't had enough of that. Um, and they've been falling in and caving to this fear of defending their kids. And that's the problem is parents aren't parenting anymore. They're afraid to defend and stand firm for their children, especially when it comes to these school boards and stuff. And I think it's important that you brought up the predator aspect. People who transition, who struggle with gender dysphoria is actually a very small percentage of people who actually transition. For instance, Leah Thomas, in this case, he was in the locker room exposing himself to us. People who struggle with gender dysphoria are dysphoric about the parts of their body that make them the sex in which they are. So if Leah Thomas, I'm not saying that I'm an expert in this and know his case specifically, but if he were actually struggling with gender dysphoria, he wouldn't be showing us his body parts and the things that make him a male. There's a thing called onagotophilia, which is people getting off on exposing themselves to people. And so I don't know if that's something that maybe Leah Thomas, Will Thomas struggles with. But again, I think that a very small percentage of people who transition actually struggle with, you know, gender identity issues, and it's crazy. So again, it makes you question how many people are actually claiming to have, gender dysphoria, or if they're actually predators going into the women's locker room. And again, having policies that allow it are just opening the door for any man to go into the women's locker room or bathrooms and do whatever perverted actions he pleases. So it's definitely not, it's putting the safety of all women at risk in those bathrooms and locker rooms.
Oh, massive. Have you ever heard of the book End of Gender by Dr. Deborah So?
I've not read it, but I have heard of it.
Well, she went on Rogan twice now, I think. We've connected a couple back and forth. I really want to get her on here because she can explain like the all of it, the science to it, the dysphoria. The one part of that book that I'll never let leave my brain because I've used it in some heated discussions with people. There are 11 worldwide studies total ever. And out of all of those studies, every single child that believed they were trans or weren't what they actually were, 85% of those kids ended up being either gay or just feminine or masculine, opposite of what they are, or autistic. Those were the three major causes. And so if you do this, 85%, you chop off your dick, and all of a sudden you're 17 and you think, what the fuck? I'm just gay, right?
Mhm.
And those are worldwide studies. There's 11 of them total.
Yeah.
Great read.
That, yeah. And that's another issue that kind of ties into all of this is the sex reassignment surgeries, which I can't even say that word seriously because you can't reassign your sex. I'm sorry, no matter how much mutilating of your body you do, you cannot change your sex. Um, and so that these surgeries that they're giving to kids under the age of 18 without parents' consent, even in these schools that they're not able to reveal the identities of their children or at least the identities that they're living by. And I'm thankful that President Trump signed another executive order. He's signing them daily now, it seems like.
I love it.
Um, Not allowing these minors to have these sex reassignment surgeries. Because again, like you said, when I was 12, 13 years old, you're going through puberty, you're figuring out who you are and learning about yourself. Obviously, when a kid comes to you and says, "Mommy, Daddy, I'm a cat or I'm a dog," that used to be, oh, you're playing pretend, it's not real, and we'll play along for a little while, but we're not going to let you live this way. But yet we have parents who are saying, okay, we're going to treat you as a cat and a dog. We're going to put a litter box in your bathroom, put you on a leash and walk you around and say that this is real and that you can live this way. People are affirming these delusions because parents are even being told that if you don't affirm your child, that you're going to have a death on your hands, you're going to have blood on your hands. And obviously, parents, they don't want their children to kill themselves. So they almost feel backed into a corner and into this affirming these delusions of their kids, and obviously leads into these crazy sex reassignment surgeries, this gender affirming care, which is absolutely sick and criminal. And I think these doctors and these people who have gone along with this and done this need to be held accountable. And I think that that is definitely something President Trump is aware of as well.
Yeah. So you asked about what it's like in Canada. So if you were a parent here and I guess it's reported by the school, or maybe you have a kid who just goes wild and reports you, you can be actually arrested and charged for not affirming your child's gender identity in this country. That's a law by under Trudeau. That is a law here.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Absolutely wild. I mean, that shows the way too much control of government. That's definitely something we've been pushing back on is trying to eliminate the big government and the control that government has, but also putting in policies that prevent this insanity from continuing. That's absolutely sick and very sad. It's heartbreaking to see what these kids are going through. I mean, we're not leading kids well anymore, and it's truly tragic. And I think that this whole gender sex reassignment stuff is going to be the biggest, come out as the biggest medical scandal in our history. And it's truly heartbreaking. Again, it makes me fearful of like raising kids and having kids and being a parent. There's so many outside influences that it's really scary to be a parent now, but also to think about being a parent in the future. So crazy.
Yeah. Do you see a shift? I'm guessing you obviously follow Charlie Kirk and you're a young adult just out of university. Do you see a shift in the classrooms where I could imagine if this shit happened when I was in high school or university I didn't go to university or college and this shit was taught, me and my buddies would be like, they're fucked. What the and we would just start laughing. There'd be no you couldn't we'd be kicked out. Our kids finally, the majority at least, because the vote from young adults went to Trump, did it not? There's got to be a shift happening in the truth, whatever direction you say. You could be red or blue, or I like how you said green, follow the money, but it, kids have to be, especially boys, their masculinity has been robbed. They've been told they're basically pieces of shit because they're masculine and they like to do boy stuff. There's got to be a shift. You tell me.
Yeah, well, being fresh off a college campus myself, I will say that college campuses are a breeding ground for this woke ideology. It's definitely pushed on us. And our First Amendment rights, college campuses, it's why I go to college campuses. I work with the Riley Gaines Center. We go to college campuses and we talk to college students who are facing, honestly, the worst of the worst because these professors push this ideology on you. They push a certain way of thinking, which college isn't supposed to be a place where you're taught how to think. A college is a place where you start learning and forming your own opinions and thoughts on things. It's no longer a place of independent thinking. Thank God I was able to have the experiences I had and was able to at least think through them myself. I think I've definitely become stronger in what I think and believe about things. But colleges are definitely a place where freedom of speech and our rights are at stake. I do have to say, though, that I do notice a shift. Organizations like Turning Point USA, as you mentioned, Charlie Kirk, have brought these places, these safe places, I feel, for these students to come and start expressing their feelings of, maybe I don't agree with this professor's way of teaching. Maybe I feel a little bit more comfortable about speaking my mind, or I'm just being simply open to a new way of thinking. And I think before, when I was on college campus, that wasn't necessarily the case. I think we were definitely taught how to think. For instance, I have a good friend. Her name's Olivia Krolchek. She was a student at the University of Cincinnati in Ohio. And she was failed by her professor for writing a paper using the term biological woman.
Come on.
And yes, she was failed and essentially failed the class. She filed a lawsuit, won it. But we have professors, obviously, crazy, 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 failing students for using terms such as biological woman, which is like science. It's common sense. And it's crazy that we're seeing professors do these kind of things. But I think that goes to show obviously these federally funded institutions are pushing ideologies that people don't realize. Parents, even kids in middle school, high school, elementary, the books, the insane, sick things that they're teaching and reading to these young kids, absolutely insane. But I am thankful for people like Charlie Kirk who have started these organizations because I think Gen Z especially gets a lot of hate that we're dumb, we're useless, we're just hopeless kids. When I think Gen Z, I'm very hopeful in my generation. I think we're the generation who's actually going to unite our country over these common sense issues. I think our country specifically has become so polarized by different political views that we're desperate for unity. And I really think that Gen Z is going to be the generation that does that. And so I have a lot of hope in my generation in that fact. So
Love it. You mentioned the Riley Gaines Center. Is that something that's going to be mainly about targeting the younger generation, like going to schools like Charlie does, that kind of vibe?
yeah, so a lot of what we do is we go and visit college campuses. We go and speak to students. There's, a lot of times we're met with a lot of pushback, protesters, people who don't like us, call us transphobes and hateful, bigoted people, and all of these things for simply saying that men and women are different. I mean, it's crazy, but these are the same exact people who preach love, inclusivity, acceptance, differences of opinion, all of these virtuous words they love to throw out there when they're in fact the opposite. They're the people who don't want to hear different views on things or different opinions. They're not loving, they're not accepting of us when we go to college campuses. But then we also have a lot of students who come and listen and they have questions. They're encouraged by the way we speak because they're like, we agree and we just haven't been able to find the words to share this with our friends. And I think that's where it starts. It's about having conversations in small circles and start being able to formulate your own opinions on these issues, these important issues in our country. Because I think a lot of people are either afraid to say something, or they don't know how to talk about it. And so I think a big part of what we do is reaching young people and equipping them with the right tools to be able to, again, think for themselves and also be able to talk about it in their inner circles. So
Have you had anybody yet where you're talking to them on campus? Sorry, you're talking to them on campus and you're like, this person's gone. They're out there. There's no way that they're gonna see the light. And then something you say or that's said and they come. Because I've seen videos of Charlie's talking to someone and he stumps them, and they're like, "Oh fuck, he's right." And you can see like a light bulb goes off. And has that ever happened to you guys yet?
Oh, for sure. And you get it's honestly what's great about being an advocate and fighting for women's sports and spaces is it's not rooted in a political ideology. It's not rooted in my opinion or even it's rooted simply based on science, biology, common sense. And so whenever there's a question or an argument posed from the opposition, it's so easy to answer because there is no winning argument on that side. You can't argue science or common sense. Ultimately, what it results in is name calling, and we know that when people resort to name calling, they know that they've lost the argument, and so it's very easy. That's what I love about doing the college campus visits is because a lot of these students have questions that are so easy to answer, so simply uh, able to be worded because it's based in science, it's based in common sense. And again, there's no winning argument on that side when it comes to biology.
No. How wild was so when we first connected, I was actually laughing because I was watching yourself and Olivia, right?
Yes.
And you guys were interviewing people at the was it a protest against Trump's inauguration?
Yeah, so they were doing a people's march, which had various organizations. So people who are like pro-Palestine, people, the LGBTQIA, like alphabet soup people, like women's rights people. So we were like, great, this is awesome. We were there for inauguration anyways in DC, and we were like, we're gonna go to these marches, these protests, and just talk with these people, have some real conversations, just ask some simple questions. We're not there to like cause any issues. We just simply wanted to ask some really easy questions. Questions like, what is a woman? And there were some of the responses we got were absolutely crazy. A simple question that should be easy to define, just, baffling to them. They couldn't even answer that question and got some really interesting responses. And so it was fun. It was interesting. I think a lot of those people, I have to say, like, my heart breaks for a lot of those people because as a believer in Christ and a believer in biblical truth, I see a lot of these people are truly lost and confused and have been lied to ultimately. And so my heart broke for a lot of them because they've simply been lied to and they've believed this lie and they can't even reason with themselves. It's this circular reasoning that they find themselves in. And so it was definitely an interesting experience, and it encourages me even to go more to these college campuses. The ones that hate us the most is where we need to be, which I think in the belly of the beast, preaching and not preaching, but like just sharing truth with these people, sharing not only my own experience, but other people's experiences, and what's happening, I think is so crucial because you can go and speak to people who already know what you're talking about, but it's going to the places like the People's March there in DC who don't think the same ways as you. Maybe you'll learn something from them or they'll learn something from you. And that's, I think, what's important is to have civil discourse because once you stop conversing, once you stop having that civil discourse, that's when people resort to violence. And we cannot stop having conversations, or else that's when the violence starts to happen. We can't make that an option. So that's why we did that. And it was fun. It was cool. It was very interesting.
Yeah, I love watching it. Do you find the most pushback you get is actually from women?
Unfortunately, yes. It is crazy that even in the sporting issue, women who fought for Title IX, people like Billie Jean King, who are icons really in women's sports and the fight for Title IX, are the same exact women who are turning around and fighting for the erasure of women's sports and fighting for the regressiveness really that we've seen from the left when it comes to women's sports and opportunities. So sadly, I do have to point the finger at women at the same time because we also vote for people who aren't supportive of women and don't stand with women. Um, I saw a study or a poll that showed that ever since, and this is crazy, and I was just like, I find it hard to believe, but it's true. Ever since women got the right to vote in our country, um, if we hadn't, every single election, the Republican Party would have won. So it's very, very interesting that women, in fact, are our own problem. And I think that that comes back to this whole feminist movement, which I call fake feminism, because we have women fighting for women's rights, which in their mind is only the right to abort a child, which I don't believe is a woman's right. That is the only right that the left is advocating for. Every other right they do not care about. So simply, they don't care for women when they are the self-proclaimed party for women. It's such a lie, and I just hope that women can see that now. They can see that they have been lied to. And I hope that women start to think for themselves and really recognize that the administration that won, the administration that got voted in, is the party for women, and is fighting for them currently.
Yeah, I've always been boggled, and I love that you brought up the abortion thing, and I love what you said about it. It's crazy that such a single issue voter as a female would vote for, and there's just pro abortion. They just want abortions everywhere, which is so sad, over the fact that the other side is so anti woman, like anti, like a dude fucking puts a dress on and chops off his wiener and starts chest feeding because he's a weirdo. And there's not, these women are like celebrating this. I always found it completely wild that, like you said, the erasure of women is, a lot of it is, well, it's the crazy weirdo dudes who are don't eat meat and they're betas, but it's I do see a lot more of it coming from women, which boggles my mind because I'm going to say 99.9% of women probably don't ever consider or need an abortion. And if you're listening and you're a hate listener and you say that Trump is pro, uh, what is it? What is it? No, he said that you can have an abortion or it's back to the states, and he doesn't really want to get into it if it's got to do with rape, incest, all of those horrific things, right? Which I kind of I don't even want to talk about because I'm lucky and I've got two beautiful kids and we never had to talk about abortion. We never would have done it anyways. But I sort of keep my mouth out of it. But I love how you said it. You know, it's not just a woman's right because there's a living baby inside of you.
Yeah. I'm all for women's, your body, your choice, especially when it came to the vaccine. What happened to your body, your choice when it came to mandating vaccines and putting chemicals into your body that you didn't even know how your body would react. It's crazy, the different ways so many different people reacted. And they recently released those side effects of the COVID vaccine, which was an endless list. I think there was everything under the sun under there, but again,
Yep.
I'm all for your body, your choice. But when it comes to someone else's life there, it is no longer your body, your choice. Um, and so that's what I think is crazy is these women who advocate for this and again vote for a party that they're saying, oh, this is your right to abort a child, to end another life. And again, most abortions are not because of they want to argue it's because of a medical reason or it's putting the mother's life at risk. No, that is like a 0.01% of abortions. The majority of abortions that happen are women who simply don't want to have the child. They don't want to live with the consequences of their actions. And they just say that they don't want it. And so that's what's heartbreaking to me, and I think should be illegal. I don't think in any case there should be an ending of a life, even in an instance of rape, because my heart goes out to victims and young kids who are raped and end up pregnant. My heart breaks for them, but when something tragic like that happens, how are we to respond? Are we to do something even just as horrific as murdering and punishing that child? I don't believe that that is the case. And again, as a believer, I think murder is wrong and murder is murder even inside the womb. And so I think it's a human rights issue. That is, the right of that child in the womb alive. And obviously is another issue, but very passionate about that one as well. But again, I think women need to start thinking for themselves more critically because again, I think we're being told lies and expected to just abide and vote for whoever we're told is the party for women, which we're not. Again, we're being lied to ultimately.
Yeah. And your side, so the Democrats are like our liberals, almost to a T, which is so scary. But even up here, if you rape a woman or if you sexually assault anybody, you might go to jail for you probably not even 10 years, honestly, up here. It's that pathetic. And then you've got Biden commuting death sentences for like child rapist killers. So you got one side of the argument that will scream we want abortions, and then the one side will say, well, let's just fucking kill them all and have death penalties. And I'm one of the people that think we should torture them. Again, whatever. But, and then that side will be like, oh, no, we can't do that. And you're like, wait a second. That's your argument for abortions is people get raped. Okay, well, let's just chop off the rapist's head, right? And then we'll just keep doing that. And then hopefully they're all gone.
I think we
But then
should
they'll
just
say that,
chop off the issue that is causing them to do that in the first place. We should just start castrating them. Like,
yeah,
hey, I'm for that, but
chop off both heads. Did you end up at the White House?
I did. That was last week, Wednesday. A week from tomorrow. Is it Tuesday? Yeah, no, it's a week from yesterday or a week from today. We got to go to the White House and witness President Trump signing the executive order to protect women's sports. Um, Honestly, a surreal, such an exciting, honestly,
I got
validating
goosebumps. I got goosebumps.
experience. Yes. It was like kind of an emotional experience, but all of the fighting and the advocating and the work that we had done all became worth it in that moment. Um, and to be there with President Trump, it was awesome. The White House was so cool. The staff was so well organized, so friendly. They treated us amazing while we were there. But to be in that moment and to see again the picture that we saw, the iconic photo of President Trump surrounded by those little girls in their uniforms and strong, independent women. My hope is just that Mark Cuban saw that and he is just eating his
Yeah.
words all over again. But really, that was just as an athlete myself and as someone who has a younger sister and cousins and knows so many other younger athletes and hopes to have a daughter of my own. That was truly the message and the point where our administration is finally saying to women and girls that we see you, we hear you, and your rights and opportunities are going to be protected. So it was truly an awesome moment to be a part of. And obviously, it's just a great first step. There's still a lot of work that is to be done from that point, but an awesome, awesome moment to capture, an awesome moment to be a part of. Very thankful and blessed.
Yeah, I love it. It's almost like coming full circle, but like you mentioned, there's still tons of work that has to be done. I think we're still decades away from cleansing this fucking mentality out of society because like you said, there's people who are still mentally ill that believe this stuff, but that must have just been such a cool experience.
Yes, yes. And obviously, like the next steps for us is we need to get, an executive order. It can be taken down just as quickly as it was put up. And so our goal is to get this passed through all legislative branches and, back onto the president's desk. So HR 28, it's been seen, the Protect Women and Girls in Sports Act of 2025, it's been seen in the House and passed. But the Senate, we need it to be passed in the Senate, and we're relying on Majority Senator Thune to do that. Obviously, we're not sure if it's going to pass. We need at least 6 Democrats to vote in support of it. But ultimately, we want to have them on record, these representatives, these elected officials in these blue states, to be on record saying, do they stand with women or do they not? I think that's important for the American people to know, and I think it's important to again have them on record saying and doing so. So again, that's where I say this fight is just getting started. There's still a lot to go, and we're obviously going to hold our representatives accountable in these states to do that.
Love it. As an American, how do you view what is going on? I'm not sure if you see the news or how much Canadian news or how much or how many of our idiot politicians end up on TV down there, but how do you guys view Canada right now?
I think that President Trump, especially, he has done a great job of meeting with allies in other nations and trying to, you know, talk and talk reason with especially Canada and Trudeau. I think for as far as this issue when it comes to Canada and Canada's government, I don't think it will act right away, but the people can. And I think if Canadians want to protect women's sports, they need to make their voices heard, and that comes at the ballot box, that comes at school board meetings and in conversations with representatives. And politicians need to respond to public pressure. And if enough people stand firm in what they believe, I truly think that real change in Canada can happen. That's what it took here in the US. We're finally taking action because people demanded it, and Canada can do the same, truly, I think, if its citizens refused to stay silent because that's what it took for us.
I'm optimistic that our map, so our conservatives are blue, so it's kind of weird. We're the opposite in terms of color. So our conservatives, which are our right wing government, is blue. Were you surprised how red your map was? I called the landslide the whole time, but I was still really afraid that they would do something fucky like they did the last one. I'm convinced we're going to be blue throughout the whole country. We're done with this shit. I think dinner time conversations, family meetings are very much they're fucking crazy. We're not doing this. We're done with this insanity. We got to protect our girls. I think that's like number 1 to 5 down every issue for or every family's issue. Were you surprised that your map was so red, or did you just kind of knew it was coming or know it was coming?
Uh, I think there was some surprise there for sure. I mean, we won in all of the swing states that we were looking at. It was a landslide. And I honestly, again, think that it took the Biden-Harris administration, it took people to see how regressive, really, they say progressive, but they're actually regressive, and how radical the party of the Democrats has become for people in states like California and Illinois and Minnesota, in these typically blue states, for us, very left-leaning states, um, to actually see that what President Trump is, it's not radically conservative what he's standing for. He's simply trying to reestablish our American values and defend the Constitution, defend our freedoms. And so we saw that during our election. I think that that was a great gauge as to where the American people are. And I think the Democratic Party right now is quickly scrambling to regain its, they've always been very good about being unified, being in lockstep. And currently, they don't even have a clear leader in their own party right now. I think they're very much lost right now. They're trying to um, regain their composure. And I think that we would be underestimating them if we thought that they were going to be down for the count, because I think that they will get back up. They'll pull their bootstraps up and they'll get reunified. And so we need to be prepared for that. We can't let our guard down now. We can't stop fighting. We can't stop what we've been doing the past 8 years. And so I think the American people, again, it took what we saw in the Biden-Harris administration, the insanity, for us to actually wake up and realize, okay, we need to start turning around things. And I truly have seen that. The tides have turned in America. I think people are more hopeful. They're excited and they're ready for all the changes that Trump has made. He has truly held to his promises. And I think that's so refreshing for the American people, is to have a leader who has gotten up and said everything he said on the campaign trail, he is actually fulfilling. I think daily now he's fulfilled some sort of promise that he made to the American people on the campaign trail.
Yeah, it's tough to get mad at a country that overwhelmingly voted for a guy based on what he promised, and he's doing them. So it's and when people get mad at Trump, and I think they're just up here, especially our media is paid for when and funded by a government, and we actually can't even see. If you go on social media, every single news network is blocked. I can't see any news network from any page anywhere in this country because our government, Trudeau, has banned it. We're communist almost up here.
That's insane. What is
Yeah.
the what is the perspective that you received? Because obviously that's probably very filtered news of what's happening in the United States. Are we seeing as an enemy? Is Trump depicted as this communist dictator that they proclaimed he would be on day one? How is he kind of, picturized?
Well, the followers of the news and the loud, I still think they're the massive minority now. But have you seen the headlines and the videos of the Toronto Raptor fans booing the American national anthem multiple times now? It's really bad. They booed it twice now, for sure twice. The last one I think was maybe last night or the night before. It was a 15-year-old girl singing the American national anthem and the entire stadium was booing. I was repulsed by that.
Wow.
It's disgusting. But
Yeah.
I gotta believe that people are smarter, but they're quiet still. It bugs me. I've never liked that about I don't know human nature or people, but I still think there's a lot of closet Trump people. A lot of people tell me only because I'm so vocal. And they're like, I fucking love that guy, and I'm like, well, why don't you say just you
Yeah.
don't have to be
Say
like
it
you don't have to
publicly.
say I love Trump, or you can just be like, hey, actually I actually like that he just signed a bill that protects our women.
Yeah.
Fucking A. Like what's there's nothing
Yeah.
controversial about that.
Do you feel like it's because it's a lot of fear involved, or just like because they don't want to be seen in the wrong light that they are so afraid to speak out? Because that's how it was here. People would whisper and say, "Oh, we support what you're doing. It's awesome. It's great. We love it." But then they wouldn't publicly say anything.
I don't know why people care so much. I've never cared. Obviously, there's something inherent in you, your upbringing, that allowed you to speak out and not really not care about the consequences, but you realized and knew that you had to, and it didn't matter what the consequences. People up here, whether it's your employer, I spoke out against COVID. I was told by a bunch of bosses that they were going to try to fire me. I didn't really care because I had other means of making money, but I don't know. I think people are afraid to speak up against the trans stuff because then they think they're going to offend their gay friends. Where all my gay friends are like, these people are fucking nuts. LGB, stop, done. Right? Where that, and these are coming from all my gay friends. My brother's gay. He's like, Mike, take your kids out of school in June because up here it's Pride Month in June. I don't know if it's like that in the US, but my own gay brother says, fuck my community. But he won't really say that out loud in public, right? I'm saying it on a podcast and I've said it a few times, so I don't really care. But I think a lot of people are just worried. So what, you know what? What would you, so if you can put yourself back, say you're like a young girl and you need to speak to parents here who still don't get it and they have daughters and they're afraid because they're going to put their employment first, which it matters, but you know what? I'm picking my daughter 1,000 times over ahead of anything. I'll move. I'll live in a fucking trailer if I have to before a boy plays against my daughter anywhere. When it comes to that point where I'll lose my job. I don't care. I don't know. What can you say as a girl? Like put yourself in that position where maybe you're asking people for help. You're asking for your protectors to do something. How can you have these people snap out of this brain freeze or fear of caring what people think over your daughters?
Yeah. I think a lot of parents or a lot of people they simply say, "Oh, this isn't it's this issue hasn't affected me or it's not affected me, so therefore it's not a problem in our eyes." But the thing is eventually it will be in your face. You will be faced with it, and at that point it could be too late. And so these parents and stuff, I would encourage them, think about your kids whenever you're making these decisions or whenever you're confronted with these issues or an opportunity to say something, please say something because for you, what does matter? You said you would choose your daughter every single time. What is it going to take for them? Is it going to take them to go up against a man in their sports, to be injured on the courts, or is it going to take them to be exploited in a women's locker room or worse? God forbid, a man going into a woman's space and doing something horrific. What is it going to take for them to actually start standing up for their own kids? Obviously, I hope those things don't happen, but unfortunately, it takes at least what we've seen, those tragic circumstances for people to see how crucial and how important it is to use your voice and to stand up for what's right. I won't say it's easy. I won't say that you're not going to face retaliation or discrimination or ostracization from your communities, because that's what my family faced. It's what my younger sister faced. But I will say it's been freeing to be able to speak the truth and to be able to speak your mind. It honestly made me stronger and more unapologetic in what I believe. It helped me learn how to stand firm in my beliefs, in my morals, and stand true to those and not be afraid. And you're also setting an example again as a parent for your kids. They're watching you, they're looking up to you, and you're setting the example for them for when they're adults and they have their own kids. And so I encourage those parents and the people in not just Canada but in other countries to really think about, what matters more to them. Does it matter what people think and maybe your job at the time or just opportunities for you, or does your family matter? And so it's sad that we have to have those questions and those ultimatums basically, but I think at the end of the day, the answer should be very clear. And it just depends on the person, I guess.
Yeah, no, I love it. And not even, I always talk about my daughter because she's a girl, obviously, and I worry more about her in all these situations, right? But even my son, I need him to see that You need to respect what women are. And that's it. Like you can't be invading and you have to protect them. As men, we are protectors. That's what we're here for, providing, protecting, guiding in the right way. And
Yes.
like you said, I'm hoping that so I'm 40, so I'm 16 years older. You're basically right between my daughter and I, right in the middle almost. And I'm hoping that what because what you're doing, she never has to do this. That is my prayer. She doesn't know this shit's going on. She's 9. We shield them from everything the best we can. I'm sure one day she, I don't know, 10, 11, 12, she'll be like, Dad, this world's fucked, you know? But I'm hoping that she doesn't have to fight this because of women like you. And I really thank you for that.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And that's why we fight. That's why so many other women fight. I'm done competing. I'm a retired washed up swimmer now. Again, I think if I got in a pool, I would probably sink to the bottom, but that's why we fight. It's for the current and future females and girls out there and my daughters, your daughter, and many others. That's why we fight. It's unfortunate that we have to, but we're happy to do it any day of the week because it's truly important what matters, and we know what's at stake if we don't.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, Canada, listen up real close and where can everybody find you online?
Well, you can find me. I'm part of the Riley Gaines Center at the Leadership Institute. So at the RileyGainesCenter.org, you can find out all about us. If you want to request us to come and speak at a place near you, you can do that on there as well. I'm also on X. I'm on Instagram. Just Kaitlynn Wheeler is my name. And just follow along with what we're doing. Just stay up to date with the legislation that we're trying to pass, and hopefully that will encourage obviously other countries to follow suit and to we're hopefully setting a good example. So, love to connect with anyone who's struggling with something similar to what I've experienced or other women have experienced. Happy to talk through those situations and help as best we can. So, just thankful for you and what you do and your voice and platform and speaking up for us and for so many other people ultimately.
Oh, thank you. Kaitlynn Wheeler. That's awesome. Historic what you were a part of. I truly believe that the shift that's happened had a huge the biggest reason I do think is the Riley Gaines is Kaitlynn Wheeler's up here, the April Hutchinsons, all of the women that, I should say finally, the ones that spoke up against these subjects specifically are the reasons why I think the shift has happened. Not even just economics. Like economically, the Democrats and the liberals up here are fucking retarded. They are inept at all levels of financing. But I do believe that the biggest issue in North America was the safety of our girls. I truly believe that's number 1 to 5. And I believe that you guys are the biggest reasons why we're healing or on our way to healing.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Of course, maybe we'll make you the 51st state and we can help you out more.
Hey,
That'd
I'm
be
not against it. Don't get mad at me. I want to carry a Glock. I think you should be able to bear arms. I like your rules better. And right now, unless we vote the right way overwhelmingly, I am not as patriotic as I should be as a Canadian. But we will see. Maybe we got one last chance this year, whenever our election is, because we have no sitting government because they're frozen. They don't fucking work. I don't know.
Yep.
But Kaitlynn, thank you so much. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. Share, follow. The more you get out there and speak your mind, the more positive change happens, especially for our girls, which is basically the most important thing right now. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.